Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today we are going to talk about U.S.-Mexico relations, the ramifications and implications of Donald Trump's threat to levy 25% taxes on all imports from Mexico. And you've seen what is happening with Canada and how the politics is unfolding. There are new developments. We have learned that the president of United States and the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, have had a conversation. And instead of the tariffs coming into effect tomorrow, that is February 4th, they have been sort of put on stay for about a month. And basically, Trump has got what he wanted. He wants a much more serious dialogue. So I guess the tariffs have been delayed. It doesn't mean that he has canceled this, and we will talk further. Today, I have a great panel with us, all scholars from Mexico and who study U.S.-Mexico relations. I have with us Dr. Jessica de Alba Ulao, who is a professor with University of Maine, and she's also the vice president of the International Studies Association. At ISA, she is what Modi likes to say, the voice of the global South. And we also have with us Professor Luis Miguel. Luis Miguel is an associate researcher, and he is a full professor who does research at the Institute of Public Administration for the state of Pueblo. He studies security and U.S.-Mexico relations. I also have with us Estefania Cruz, who is an associate researcher with the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Those of you who watch Khanversations regularly, you know that I have just launched a new think tank initiative called Ibn Khaldun Center, for which Estefania wrote a very good memo on reshoring, friendshoring, and basically how Mexico is becoming the substitute to China with regards to US and US manufacturing trade. So we will continue to talk about this, but for those of you who have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. So this is my first question to you all was when Donald Trump threatened to impose these tariffs, 25% tariffs on its biggest trading partner. Mexico is the biggest trading partner of the US by far, bigger than Canada, bigger than China. The total trade expected for 2024 is over $800 billion. The US, Mexico is exporting over 400 and close to $430 billion, but is also the second biggest importer of US goods, is over 300 plus. And so the deficit is not the biggest. Keep this in mind. It's the biggest trading partner, but the trade deficit that Mexico has with the US is far less than China, even by more than $150 billion. So how did people in Mexico react to this, and how did you all perceive? Did you think of it as a threat or actually a serious thing? So I'll start with Jessica, then Luis, then Estefania.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be in the Khanversations for the first time. So I would say that in Mexico there was this attitude of, well, he had claimed that he was going to do that before, and he didn't. So this is only a tactic, and so he's going to find something to not slap us with a tariff. So sort of saying that a dog that barks does not bite. Well, so it's not a threat. So he actually did not invite the president of Mexico to the inauguration because the team was preparing this. President Trump did not have to open any negotiations before putting the tariffs in place. So I think that the Mexican government and everybody else should have taken that literally, because normally what Trump does is he delivers. It's just not talk. So we should see that coming and maybe a little bit unprepared for that, even though that happened before. There was a retaliation. So now we see that they're going to delay for 1 month, depending on how we behave, quote unquote, in controlling the border.
Luis?
Yes, I think that Jessica got to the point that dog who barks doesn't bite. But at the same time, I am thinking that probably Donald Trump because I have seen his kind of statements or kind of how he announced everything on security, on migration, on commerce, and everything on. It's like I'm going to try this, so I want to see what is going to be their reaction. I want to declare this because I want to see how it's going to move these kind of things on this issue. So probably Donald Trump on the irrational actor is he's rational in taking this kind of attitudes to threat, to act, to make things, something like that. No, Mexico is, from my point of view, because we had Donald Trump before, is used to have this kind of attitudes from Mexico. For example, I was remembering when we didn't have any any commercial agreement. For example, in the 80s plus the 90s, and it was like, what is going to be the commercial embargo or the tariffs that are going to be with our partners that is going to take from now on. Donald Trump, from my point of view, is like trying to push Mexico on the issues that he is worried about. For example, the fentanyl, the drug traffickers who are linked to the government, and migration. So he probably is just like answering to the vote to be selected as his president, because he make an statement. I am just remember that he wanted to give results to the electoral vote, because he wants to show everyone that he is moving faster, and he's trying to get something that probably is going to be a political winning action internally. So Mexico is not like a country that is going to be afraid. It's not going to be something like that.
We should also keep in mind that this is his second term. He's not going to be running again. So a lot of the things that he's going to do is because he wants it done, and not because it's going to give him political dividends. Estefania, your reaction.
I think Mexican consumers, Mexican government, and US consumers are happy to see the approach of the end of this, which to me is one of the most ridiculous trade war in history. I agree with Ronald Reagan when he said that tariffs are a tool of foreign policy only against hostile nations, and Mexico and Canada are closest allies to the United States. So I think we feel some relief after this reaching this deal between Mexico and the United States. But I want to put some issues on the table today. First, I'm concerned because there is not economic or geopolitical reasoning behind those tariffs proposed by Trump. Some governments in the United States, some governors said that they were targeting even Republican states, particularly Texas, for example. Texas and Mexico have economic dependency, and in the case of Canada, Maine and Michigan with Canada. The second, each chamber of commerce in the United States proposed that it was harmful for U.S. market. And then, if we think we have one of the most important, most solid regional agreements in the world, USMCA in force, so it harms one of the most important economic regions in the world. So to me, there's not rational behind this trade war in North America. And finally, I want to say that the agreement reached between Mexico and the United States includes mobilizing 10,000 forces to the US-Mexico border. If we think during the past administration, we had a similar crisis. It was a migratory crisis, and the United States proposed tariffs to contain migration from Mexico. The agreement was to mobilize, included to mobilize 6,000 Mexican troops to the south border of Mexico. So if we think mobilizing 10,000 troops to the northern border, it's not a big deal for Trump. So it's crucial to understand what's going to happen in the next month for the negotiations between Mexico and the United States, and I think Canada should join the negotiations, this high-level dialogue, to solve this diplomatic crisis, because I don't think this is a trade war. I think this is more a diplomatic crisis between Mexico and the United States, and the big deal is fentanyl. It's not migration.
So picking up on your argument, whether there is a geopolitical rationale. So Donald Trump basically is talking about three things, or what he's publicly saying. One is that fentanyl is being shipped across the border from the north and south. The Canadians insist that it's only 1% of it comes from Canada, and most of the smugglers are Americans. At least all the people who've been arrested on the border so far are Americans on the US-Canada border. But the second thing is flow of illegal migrants. I mean, this is the big issue, right? And this is probably one of the reasons why he got elected president. And the third one is the trade deficit. Donald Trump thinks that trade deficits are like a negative score of a match. Like you're playing a match, and when you look at trade deficit, it shows that other countries are taking advantage. But let me also suggest to you that it is also...
I want to say something on trade deficit, because this is important. Donald Trump is managing the trade deficit comparing with debt. Trade deficit is not debt, and that's something important in his discourse.
Yeah, it basically says that the US is exporting less and importing more, partly because of the cost, right? Because of the low cost. If you look at the per capita GDP of Mexico and Canada, the cost of manufacturing, say, cars, which are about 40% of the cars are coming from these two countries. So, but I think what Trump is trying to do is, I mean, he wants the immigration stuff also to happen, but he's trying to bring back manufacturing to the US. And I think he's trying to reverse everything that started with Bill Clinton in 1992, which we all put under the label globalization. So I think he is putting an end to globalization. He wants to reverse it. He wants to bring back manufacturing, even if it means a loss of efficiency, loss of cost, because I think that is where he sees that America will be stronger. I mean, how do you think this will impact, Estefania, the economy of Mexico? Then I'll come to Luis and then Jessica. How will this impact US economy? Because the predictions are that if the tariffs are in place, both Canada and Mexico will be in recession within 6 months.
Yeah, I think this is an impossible struggle for Donald Trump, because he's trying to fight against globalization. He's fighting against history. Let's just give an example. One of the main sectors in North America is automotive industry. Before putting a car in the US market, a car crosses the US, Mexico, and Canadian border 19 times. 40% of the components of a US car, a car sold in the United States, come from Mexico. 13% of the components come from the United States. And we should count also the specialized work, not only manufacturing, but also technological work doing mainly in Canada. So it seems that Donald Trump is trying to decouple very integrated economic change. And I think this is an impossible struggle. I don't see how a US worker is going to work for the wage the US companies are paying in Mexico. It's impossible. You can bring all those manufacturers to the United States. I think Donald Trump should invest in new technologies instead of trying to bring cheap works to the United States.
Luis, do you think that his concern on the border, the security concerns that Donald Trump has with regards to fentanyl and with regards to illegal migration are legitimate, and that the nonstop flow of these two things are somewhat to blame on Mexico not doing enough on the border. I mean, these are security issues for Mexico also, isn't it?
Okay, we have to remember two things. First, we had a president here in Mexico that his policy on security issues were the slogan of saying, uh, abrazos, no balazos, hugs, not bullets. And that policy didn't work because all the organizations dedicated to the drug trafficking market started to grow, to grow all over the country because they realized that this policy was like a something we are we are not doing what we are supposed to do, that is to fight against what you are doing. That's on the drug issue. The second one was that Mexico had a problem since much more than 10 years and 20, that migration has been an, a national problem since we didn't take care of the south border. And when I say not take care, is that we let, I mean the government let to Central Americans, South Americans, and from other countries to be starting to cross that border and to get to the United States. What happened? The United States realized that Mexico could or didn't want to control the path of these migrants, and they started to flood all these in the south states of Arizona, Texas, California, and they realized that Mexico had to do something about it. And the Mexican government so was very pressured on to be the third nations or the third nation to accept these migrants that were asking for asylum in the United States. But how long? I mean, we had a crisis, food crisis, violence, and all these kind of issues because as it was another seminar that I was participating, drug dealers and migrants cross in the same routes that go to the United States. So suddenly we are combining two issues at the same time, no? Drug traffickers wants to get to the United States because of their business, and the others because they want to get rid of their lives and get into the United States to have a better life. So, and Mexico was pushed and is and has to do something about these two issues. I consider that this President Chamber is realizing that all these kind of issues that were not taken care of before, they are going to be taken care of today. And we are starting from zero.
But Miguel, see, if I was president of Mexico, both of these problems are primarily US problems, right? So for me to patrol my southern border to prevent people coming into Mexico, and then also patrolling the northern Mexican border to prevent drugs going. So it is like a demand that Mexico subsidize US security. So you are asking Mexico to subsidize US security. We want Mexico government. So I'm sure that Americans will understand this within a second, and there will be military aid and resources coming from the US. So in that sense, Mexico ends up becoming like a contractor for the US to maintain its own borders, but funded by the US. So the analogy is like Turkey for Europe, cutting off migrants coming from the Middle East and Africa. You have a similar situation in Turkey, and the European Union. Erdogan used it to get a lot of aid out of European Union. They were paying Turkey billions of dollars to stop the immigrants coming into EU. But I think that Mexico has to somehow deal with it, because the trade, I think, benefits Mexico a lot more significantly in terms of elevating the quality of life and per capita income, and becoming, especially as U.S.-China relations become more tense for many other reasons, Mexico stands to gain the most from the decoupling of U.S.-China economy. So do you think that the U.S. should step up, Mexico should step up and, basically subsidize U.S. security?
Well, I don't think that subsidize is the word that I use to deal with this problem. I think that Mexico, and he has started to do it with Calderon, continued with Peña Nieto, and was interrupted with López Obrador. And Sheinbaum is taking this policy, is to collaborate with the American agencies on security issues. I'm just going to put just one example, as Stefania put the example on the car issues, on the car commerce. In the US, they have, and we were invited, I remember when you were there, how many drones are flying all over the country, all over Mexico, all over the border, and they see how who is who, what is going to where, how is going things down there. And for example, the Mexican government doesn't want to deal with that because they are afraid. They are colluded with the political and the local police officers. They are not supposed to fight them because they are afraid because of the gun issue, that they are much more sophisticated with arms than the Mexican government. But at the same time, we are not supposed to close that door to collaborate with the American agencies on security. This is a shared responsibility, because I am not mentioning right now, and I don't want to get into this, that the fentanyl is the American problem. No, just you are not getting rid of this, it's public security, blah, blah, blah. No. The Mexican government has to do and to deal with the organizations that are supplying the American market. And we were doing that. I remember, for example, during the Calderon and Peña Nieto, my colleagues in the US said, yes, it has been reduced, the amount of many drugs that we are receiving before the collaboration of the two countries, because they were fighting them. Not to capture just Zambada and to say, we are getting Zambada and we are dealing with that and the issue is going to be solved. No, there are many like Zambada fighting for the market. So Mexico has to collaborate with the United States for that and for many other issues.
Jessica, you now live in the US and you're seeing the debates here, and you've seen that during the Biden administration. I mean, the Trump administration has been emphasizing how millions of people have come across border during the Biden presidency. This was not an issue at all. I mean, we never heard of the Biden administration either trying to pressure Mexico to either stop the drugs or stop the migrants or any of these issues. From the things that both Miguel and Estefania are pointing out, it is clearly obvious that there are going to be many hurdles to actually execute the policy that Trump wants to achieve. But how do you see the global impact of what Donald Trump is trying to do? I mean, he's going after the two of the best friends. That has been his first move, is to hit your best friends. And this is, I mean, especially in the case of Canada, G7 partner, Five Eyes partner, G20, and NATO, and so what do you think are going to be the repercussions of this policy, even if he gets some sustain border controls from both Canada and Mexico?
Sure. So let's start by stating some facts. First of all, I would say that countries do not have friends. So starting with that, you will understand that neither Mexico nor Canada are friends of the U.S. because that's how all countries react. We can see different examples in the European Union, but that's a different process of integration that they had followed. That is not the same process that has happened here in North America, which started, by the way, with George W.H. Bush and perhaps in spite what Clinton wanted to continue with. Clinton, remember, he was not sure that he wanted to sign NAFTA at the time. And then there is a story that President Carlos Salinas de Gortari came and say, hey, my friend President, do you want more migrants crossing illegally into the U.S.? So if you don't, please sign the treaty. Anyway, the reality shows that after the signing of NAFTA, immigration soared. And we're seeing that for the past 4 years with the Biden administration, immigration soared because they did not put, they just took out the different controls that the previous Trump 1 administration had put in place to get the levels down. So yes, I think that Trump 1 is very different than Trump 2 in the sense that he now knows what to do. He knows how to do things. Whereas in the first term, he probably did not have all the capacities that require all the play knowing on the power politics at the presidency. Now he has that knowledge acquired, and this makes a lot of difference. And then thinking that we're going to face elections in 2 years, that's probably going to lose, the governing party is going to lose Congress at some point. Well, he knows that he needs to move fast. So thinking that, oh my goodness, the U.S. is going to lose a lot if they do that. It's not only Mexico who loses. I'm not going to get into Canada because we know that Canada loses as well. I think that's not thinking things through. Yes, the U.S. is going to suffer, but hey, pay attention. 80% of the exports of Mexico go to the United States. 40% of all exports are automotive related. We have companies thinking, U.S. companies thinking of relocating their enterprises that are in Mexico into the United States precisely because of all those shifts in the movements of the supply chains. They don't want to feel attached to a partner that is probably not going to be very reliable. But not only that, yes, the U.S. will suffer, but Mexico will suffer a lot more. We need to remember that in 2020, with the pandemics, 2021, Mexico's per capita decreased 8.5%, and it was the one of the last countries to recover after the pandemic, and we have had some growth of 1.5%, if I'm correct. Last year, it was only 1% or so. So we are in a very, very dire position with those tariffs. Now, Miguel was saying, well, before immigration and security were not attached to trade, and that's how the Mexican government was able to sign an agreement with the U.S. because they were able to I'm not sure about the word in English, but to compartmentalize. Compartmentalize the different issues. And that allowed the negotiators to go through to a trade agreement, leaving the security issues and the immigration issues aside. Well, it becomes clear that now Trump was elected for 1, immigration, 2, the economy. So those are tied together also with the fentanyl crisis and everything. So yes, if we saw how the illegal crossing and the border soared during the Biden administration, And we saw that the Biden administration did not do a lot to address what was happening with the violations of the trade agreements that Mexico was starting to commit during the past Mexican administration, and the security issues. So they kept a low profile, but still they sent high-level officials once and again to Mexico City to talk about those issues, but not publicizing them. So we had trade, we had security, but the only thing that they were really interested about was immigration. So not to make the Biden administration look so, we're not doing anything to contain, we're not doing, we have a crisis in the border. That was in every media outlet. So one media covering, no, nothing is happening, everything is fine. But then the other media outlets covering, well, this is what is really happening and you should know about it. So let's not forget that Trump was elected because of two main issues, like I said in the beginning. So it's probably you would say, well, this is a Mexican problem. This is a U.S. problem. They should control their border. Well, what do you say if all the military, the U.S. armed forces are just, instead of being in Iraq or in Afghanistan, they're being brought back to the border with Mexico? That would be unthinkable. And another thing about the Mexican government, you, as the government, you should know who is in your territory. So why are you also allowing all the crossing when you know that they're not willing to stay here? They're using their safe conducts as refugees that the Mexican government is giving to those people to go to the U.S. So it's not about staying in Mexico and working in Mexico. Everybody knows that they want to cross and they want to go into the U.S. And that's creating a problem to the Mexican authorities, because that also means that the Mexican immigration law is being broken by those people. So it's just not a question of Mexicans crossing illegally. It's about everybody crossing illegally from the Mexican border, which is something that Mexico as a state should also prevent, or at least make its laws count for something. Which brings me to the last issue, and I'm going to stop here because I've talked for a long time. The rule of law in Mexico is in a very thin ice, I would say, because we just passed a reform to make the judicial not a civil service career, like professionalizing the different positions for the judges, even in high court, but just to be elected by people that may or may not know the requirements for those people to start judging. So that is going to open the door for huge corruption. If you consider that before, Ambassador Christopher Landau said that 30% of the territory in Mexico was controlled by the cartels. Now, Secretary Rubio says 40% of the Mexican territory is controlled by the cartels. Well, of course, this becomes a national security issue for the United States. And like Luis Miguel said, it's not a question of just making a blind eye and say, no, that the fentanyl crisis is just a U.S. problem. No, it's a Mexico problem because the cartels are taking over. And we see a rule of law going very, very thin. And then who is going to want to invest in Mexico if you don't uphold your treaties? You're saying, well, the U.S. is losing in front of its allies, not friends, but allies, because it's not withstanding the trade agreements that they have signed before. Well, the same goes for Mexico. Mexico canceled a lot of contracts that had been signed before the past administration, and the past president, he just came to office and undid the whole thing. So the rule of law is important. We see that in the case of Mexico. We're seeing what the U.S. is thinking about the rule of law internationally with its binding agreements, using them as a tactic of, okay, those are my priorities. And this trade is tied not only because of the deficit, it's tied to immigration and security. And this needs to stop. And it goes again to calling the foreign terrorist organizations, the Mexican cartels. I can tell you that I've talked to a lot of people in Mexico, and many of them agree that we need something else be done in Mexico because things are going south very, very quickly. And if the Mexican government is not able to do that, well, then we need something else to happen.
Estefania, if you look at the different response to Mexico with regards to Canada, for example, right? We had a phone call today, and the tariffs have been stayed for a month. It is quite possible that part of it is that Trump is modulating his position based on the reactions that he's seeing coming globally, especially the stock market going down, not just in the US, but globally. So all his rich friends are losing billions of dollars today. So there is possibility that his next step is obviously the European Union is going to go with him. I disagree with most things with Donald Trump, but I do agree with him that at least Europe has definitely abused the United States since the end of World War II. They have been free riders, I think. And the US has paid a heavy price for keeping Europe rich, prosperous, free, and democratic. So as Trump learns the consequences of his policies, do you think that it is quite possible that in the next 1 month, the US and Mexico will come up with some kind of arrangement, which will, I don't know, listening to both Jessica and Luis, it seems to me that the Mexican government has been quite reckless with its own security and with its own population, allowing cartels to basically go and unable to go after the cartels. This is similarly like demanding the Taliban government to go after ISIS and Al-Qaeda, whom they have protected for so long inside their borders. So do you think that the Mexican government will be able to retool itself in the next 1 month to make sure that the tariffs are not reinstated, but these two problems are at least addressed, you know, and the flow of drugs and flow of people?
Before going to your question, I just want to briefly add some insights on this issue about if Mexico is subsidizing US security. I just want to add something. Maybe migration is not a Mexican problem, but the dependency on remittances is. Remittances are our third source in Mexico. Also, maybe drug consumption is a problem of the United States, but drug trafficking generated violence is our problem. Forced disappearance, extortions happening in Mexico are our problem. So I think we have shared problems. That's why we cooperate with the United States on security issues. We see that agenda, that as a bilateral agenda. Now, going to your question about the position of Trump with Mexico, that seems it's differentiated from Canada. Mexico cannot be in a worse scenario now. The projections of growth for Mexico for this year are negative. So with all those tariffs, we have a worse scenario ever in Mexico. So what happens? I think the United States see Mexico as part of the world, Mexico, the world country, as part of his hemispheric security. Every problem in Mexico has effects in the United States. So I think that's why President Trump agrees to negotiate with a cooperative ally that Mexico. Mexico is not hostile to President Trump. Claudia Sheinbaum, from the very first day after Trump got elected, after Trump was elected, was very propositive and tried to establish communication with the Trump government. That I think we knew Trump had an anti-Mexican rhetoric during this second term, but I think Mexican government was prepared also for tariffs for for putting pressure on security issues regarding to Mexico. So I think that's the reason why we reach an agreement quickly, because both countries know the strong dependency, asymmetrically, but a strong dependency on each other.
Looking forward to these problems, I think you know this concept of the Overton window, right? Trump has made certain things that we can talk about now openly, which he didn't talk about in the past. Other politicians would not bring this up, like annexing Canada, for example, making it the 51st state. He doesn't want Mexico as a 52nd state. I mean, you can see that's clearly racism. They are white people and Hispanics, so he doesn't want Mexico as a state. But ultimately, is this the end of international liberalism? This whole idea of borderless world. Kenichi Omae wrote a book in the 1980s titled "The Borderless World." Are we going back? This is to returning to mercantilism. Are we returning back to the old geopolitics? And Jessica would really love this, where realism dominates in foreign policy. There are no friends, there are only national interests, right? So, but all of that will also mean losing the prosperity dividend that we got from globalization, and the benefits to India and China, to Mexico, to Vietnam, to many East Asian countries from the 30 years of globalization that we had is immeasurable. But are we going back to the eras of global geopolitics and war? So I'll start with Miguel and then come back to both of you. And this is my last question. So go ahead, Miguel.
Well, first of all, I would like to think that this liberal issue that we are seeing in the United States is, I don't know, this second term of Donald Trump is, I mean, how do you say, for nuts? it's something very crazy. I mean, he makes some kind of statements. And for example, I just keep saying, is that real? Is that what he's saying real? That he wants Canada and he wants Greenland and he wants many other things. I think that we are not going back, as you mentioned, because probably this is going to be the administration that is going to take advantage of the electoral vote. But at the same time, they are going to realize that many issues in many countries are not on the same way. For example, I was seeing the news, for example, in Germany, that there were all these parades against the ultra-right government or politics that is forming and is getting to the power, and they are against that. So the word, from my point of view, is liberal, just liberal, but we are not have to think that this liberal issue is going to be like Donald Trump wants, because if he is going to act in that way, probably many countries are going to react and to make a front to stop him. I mean, for example, Canada. Canada, I used to hear from you, well, from all Americans, that Canada were not neighbors, were friends. Well, right now, Canada is like saying, what is going on? I mean, why this president wants we annex to the U.S. as an state? This kind of statements are probably not going to be very helpful for his relations with other countries. You know? For example, I treat these countries in one way just to see what is going on today or tomorrow. Today is Netanyahu going to U.S. to to get the support of the United States. And this liberal issue that the the uh, the ones that are fighting against Israel, the Palestinians, are supposed to leave the state. What is that kind of liberal issue that you are recommended to the countries? No, so I don't think that this liberal issue that we are seeing with Donald Trump is going to stay for a long time and is going not to affect many issues and many countries that the US needs not for today, for tomorrow, and for the years that are going to come. Because the US, as many countries, they are connected globally on commerce, migration, security, on all the issues. So this liberal issue is not like the 19th, 18th century. This is the liberal issue, like I am just have the support of the electoral vote, and I am going to act on that way and see what happens.
Yeah, you're right there. The first guest appearing here is an internationally wanted criminal. That is what the Trump administration is going to host. Jessica, I wanted to talk to you about this. This whole idea is that interdependence should have precluded such policy making, right? So all the interdependence between North American trades, U.S. Europe trade, all of that is breaking all of that and reasserting what we would in IR theory consider absolute sovereignty of the state. In fact, listening to the way the Canadians have reacted and the constant invocation of the principle of sovereignty, it suggests very clearly that we are seeing an attempt by the biggest power in the system to essentially diminish the interdependence that takes away the autonomy of states. Do you see it that way?
Well, I would, you know why I like realism much? Because it really tells you what is and not how you want things to be. So if you assess the real scenarios, how things are playing and how things are happening, you may have a clearer way of acting towards your objectives. It's not all about interdependence. I know that we're interconnected and the world is interconnected. And so we are very different world than we were like 50 years ago. But at the same time, let's not get so Western centered and let's look abroad and let's look about what China is doing. Let's look about what Russia is doing. So do you think that they love the liberal world? They don't. So it's not a question of living in the liberal order. It's just a question of adjusting to the new realities that we are all facing. So please, let's not have this narrow sense of, oh my God, Trump is just saying those weird things, like, for instance, the Panama Canal, or, for instance, to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, or even buying Greenland, because those things are anchored in bigger geopolitical questions. That if you see those things or declarations like that, you might think, what is the point of changing the name of the Gulf? Well, there is a geopolitical point of changing the name of the Gulf, which is security, and mainly security for the U.S. So what is going to happen if something happens in the Gulf of Mexico? Is the Mexican army going to defend it? Oh, well, guess what? We can't. We don't have the capacity to do so. So who has to do it? Well, the United States. In Greenland, they hold like most of the security defense of Greenland is in U.S. hands. So it's not just speaking about this out of thin air. It has geopolitical background. In the Panama Canal, the U.S. is very concerned that it is China which holds most of the most important ports within the canal. So what is going to happen if China chooses to close and to choke commerce in the Panama Canal, well, the U.S. is going to suffer. So yeah, it goes deeper than that. We would do us a disfavor, for instance, in the Mexico government and society, or everybody else abroad, to think that those things have no sense and they make no sense whatsoever, and that President Trump has gone nuts. Because everything happens for a reason, and we're in a very different position now that we were before.
Estefania, how do you see it? Like, what are the global trends that you see which are going to be impacted by Donald Trump's this aggressive foreign policy?
Yeah, I don't think we are at the end of liberalism, world liberalism. I think we have good examples of multilateral cooperation in Asia, in the Middle East. I think the problem is in the Western world. And I think one of the learning from history, one of the things we see is the rise of anti-Americanism always generates the rise of nationalism. And I think this is happening now in Mexico and in Canada. The tariffs only help through those party in election year, and tariffs also are helping President Sheinbaum. She needed support against her failed policy against cartels in Mexico. Now she has the support she needs. So I think this is only a problem of the United States. The United States is passing to a very nationalistic moment and is forgetting the reliance on closest allies like Mexico, the United States. I also want to add something. Who's taking advantage of this distance between US and Canada and Mexico and the United States? Of course, China. I think US consumers will suffer with tariffs on agro imports from Mexico. But who is replacing exports in Mexico? China. We only have the only reason Mexican consumers can buy US manufacturers and services is because of the USMCA. If we don't have a treaty, then Chinese manufacturers are replacing US manufacturers in Mexican market. So who is losing and who's winning in this war? And I think we are in an important, in a turning point for the region of North America.
Yeah, I think that is the main point. The ultimate winner is going to be China economically. Not only that, but it is quite possible that you might see geopolitical alignments, I will probably do a brief short show in which I will suggest to Canada that maybe they should join the Belt and Road Initiative to offset the problems that they are going to face from losing exports to the US. But anyway, I want to thank all of you for this very thoughtful discussion and for coming on the show and sharing your views. And yes, we are, I think, going through a very interesting from a scholarly and academic point of view, but also quite troubling because the world is changing, and at the moment we don't know what's on the other side of the tunnel, right? We can hope that it gets better. So once again, Jessica, Luis, and Estefania, thank you very much for coming. And for those of you who have not visited me before, please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and share this video with others. I'm going to also provide a link to Estefania's article that she wrote for my initiative, the Ibn Khaldun Center, and you can see that you're seeing it right now as I speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.